Okay, so what this is, it's from the Imrei Admor haZaken. And he says to understand the institution of the Shisha Ketzavot, which in this language and vocabulary means actually the six directions, like the six sides of a cube. And what I've found is it's a little bit hard to read all the words and explain it all from the beginning. I just want to show it's not a very long piece. You can go in Hebrew books, get to book number 32917, and turn to page 147. Lahavin Inyan Shisha Ketzavot, Ma'alamata, up and down, Mizrach Marav, east and west, Saflan Vidarum, north and south. Let's go. So I'll summarize this first part as it says, like, look, we see with thought that when ideas go from up to down, in the intermediate stage, there's an extension out. You can imagine up and down is one axis, an extension out into a two-dimensional plane, like a three-dimensional object, into the cardinal directions, which are not up and down. So north, south, east, and west. He has associations for what is what. So like specifically, east is the right direction. So that's chasadim. Left would be gevurot. That's west here. And then north and south are also like expansions. But all of these things are not in the key direction. Whole process as this teleology of up to down. That's the most important, the most fundamental. And let's actually just see it in his words, how the process goes through. It goes to Mizrach and Marav. So the Iker HaKlali who is going from Sofa Shabbat Sechel Shabbat Mata up to down is the most important. Up. Shu Hadchalot HaShefa, very Mata who Kalot HaShefa Achar Shin Pashad Arba Sitrin Kodem Kalotam Lagamri. So you could make this interesting English language pun that to make a point, the idea has to start in your brain, and it has this expansion out, and then it has to come together to a point, intellectual point, but also doing this geometric thing. The ideas come together to a point in the mind of the person receiving the idea. And so, worth pointing out, this language is developed in Imrei Binah by the Mittler Rebbe, his son, the son of the Alter Rebbe. So Shpia Kodem and Klota Shloyu, Adayin, Arba Sitrin, all comes together to one point. The Dal, Nimsa Shemalamata, so up and down. Inam Bichlal Hishpatu Orach Verochav Klal. So Orach and Rochav, those words indicate the cardinal directions, north, south, east, west. Up and down, by contrast, up and down, that's the kav, that's yored from up to down. So the line going from up to down, first it extends east to west. Here's where he says it. There's a secondary expansion into the second dimension of this plane, which is the third dimension of the whole thing, into the north-south axes. That's how this works. And so he says, as in thought, so too in the physical world. And then in the physical world, so too in the spiritual world. That's the very interesting progression here. That there's a creation both in the physical world and in the spiritual world that we understand using this language of dimensionality. It's actually, this is the union of the Merkava. The Merkava has four sides, different things on each side, without getting into it so much. But so the most important thing is not the four sides. The most important thing is this up and down dimension. which, if you focus on the externalities of the Merkava, you'll get caught up in those. He says you have to understand it's actually important, this Mala and Mata, that's the Ikar. Okay. So what this builds up to is how the Shekhinah works and how there's a reversal of things. So B'hiyot Yeridat HaShefa, the Malchut, Kamo B'zman Shebeit HaMikdash, Hayam. There's the Heichal, there's the Kodesh Kodashim. There's what we face during davening. So let's say outside of when you pray, it's a directionality. Usually we face east. But if you were closer to Israel, or you were in Jerusalem, you would face the direction of the location of the Kodesh HaKodashim, the holiest location in the temple. And so if you were in the temple, the Holy of Holies was located not in the east, it was located to the west, on the Ma'aravi. The Kotel HaMa'aravi, the western wall, is the wall that was closer to the Holy of Holies. And so if you're standing outside of the temple, you face east, and you can aim towards the Holy of Holies. If you're on the other side of the temple, or you were in the temple, you would face west. So the Kodesh Kodashim was in Marav. Inyan Shekhinah Marav. So the Shekhinah, this presence of God, was in the west, not the east. So Hare Kish Mishtachavim Klape Heichal Kodesh Kodashim Shebamarav, when the people were in the temple and they were bowing down, they would face not east, but west. Hayupanav Lamarav, their faces were towards the west. The Daram Hulu Smola, so the south was to their left. Vitzafon Liyamina, now the north was to their right, which if you go and read through this piece, it's kind of the opposite of how he set it out initially. Part of the reason why this was, it's hard to read all the words and explain what's going on. Behefech kishapanav lemizrach shidarom liyamina. It's the opposite of when your face is towards the east. If you're facing east, as I am now, then to my right is the south of Manhattan. That's where I'm located. V'atam sheba mekabel shehu malchut nasa behefech mekamut shehu b'mashpia kechotam mithapech. The reason for this is that when you receive something, so use a thought as a metaphor, well, it's similar to a stamp. You could think of like an embossed image with something raised up, or a wax seal. What was raised up in the seal, sticking out, becomes something that's very pushed in the seal. And the opposite, what in the seal is like recessed, now becomes something protruding in the resulting wax. That if you emboss it, push it down with it. And so with it, a chotam, it reverses. Okay, like if you have text sticking out of a signet ring, and you push down with a signet ring, it creates resulting text that is in, and the opposite is true. If you have text that is recessed and push down the signet ring, it creates text that is pointing upwards. V'zehu aldat b'chilufei atvan v'dal. So the va'ed in Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto L'Olam va'ed, this is b'chilufei otiyot, this is the echad of the first pasuk of Shema. Me'achar she'shefa yored b'chinat kav b'char kach liyamin, har yamin zeh hu l'smol ha'makabel. So once it comes down from up above, first pasuk of Kriyat Shema represents Yehuda Ilah, up above, and then Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto L'Olam represents Yehuda Tata, down here below, in the world of Makabel. So what was left is now right, and what is right is now left. There's a inversion, a reversal. Adam shemekabel shefa miyamin adam hamashpia lo shema'acher she'omed lemul pnei hamashpia harismo mekabel neged yamin hamashpia. If you're facing someone and you put out, say, my south hand, so for me this is my right hand, but for someone opposite me who put out their south hand, would be their left hand. I actually had a kindergarten teacher who was trying to teach us not north and south, trying to teach us right and left. So a teacher got up in front of the whole class and said, all right, everyone, stick out your right hand. The teacher was facing us. And the teacher thought that we're kindergartners and wouldn't be able to understand, inversions because we'd never seen a mirror. So they put out, their hand on their north side, which is actually their left hand, wanted us to extend our right hands on our north hands. But I knew the difference between the two, so I couldn't follow along the lesson for kindergartners. But that's the lesson at the end here. But Mizrach and Marav, Safon and Daron, and Mala Mata, the pattern of thought teaches us about the dimensionality of the physical world, and the dimensionality of the physical world can teach us about the dimensionality of the spiritual world. A relatively difficult piece, for me, at least, in the words of the Alter Rebbe, but very, very key for understanding what the Mittler Rebbe is doing in Imrei Binah. So I thought I would share.